Is Venezuela part of America now?
I think Donald Trump would like it to be.
It really does seem like he is taking us back to a very different time when commodities were everything and countries fought each other over the oil or the gold.
There was basically an explosion of nudifying and child sexual abuse material courtesy of Grok.
This argument of like, we're all just having fun. Here I am, Elon Musk in a bikini. This is just fun stuff. Like, how illegal is that?
I'm not sure Elon really cares about any of it. I don't think that he's opposed to what we're talking about. He tends to react whenever there's some big consideration of liability.
My number 7, after 7 days of 2026. Thank you for my free trial. I would like to unsubscribe.
Hello, and welcome to Slate Money, your guide to the business and finance news of the week. I'm Felix Salmon of Bloomberg. I'm here with Emily Peck of Axios.
Hello, Felix.
With Elizabeth Spiers of the New York Times.
Hello.
And, very excitingly, we are giddy with anticipation with the one and only Lizzie O'Leary of Slate.
Hello.
Hi, Lizzie. Welcome. You also podcast on Slate.
I also podcast on Slate. I host a podcast called What Next TBD.
And so we have brought you on basically because you're the best person and we love you very much and you're great, but also because you have been doing a big deep dive into X, Grok, Elon, and various ickiness thereabouts. So we are going to talk about that. We are also going to talk about, well, we are also going to allow Emily to go off on her own deep dive that she has done into, what's it called? It's not called welfare anymore. It's called temporary assistance for needy families.
Why are you making it sound the most boring possible?
It is actually going to be a good rant.
This like underpins the economy in so many ways, Felix.
When Emily gets the good rant going, it's you want to stay around for that. But of course, we are going to lead with Venezuela because that's the big news of the week. We have a Slate Plus segment about Greeks and plays and Joyce and fun and why you all need to buy a ticket to see Ulysses at the Public Theater. And, well, mainly because Lizzie's here. It's just going to be an awesome, awesome episode. So stay tuned. It's all coming up on Slate Money. So let's start this week with Venezuela, which we didn't talk about last week because it hadn't happened yet. But we all woke up over the weekend and there were lots of headlines of bombs and deaths and kidnappings and whatnot. And now, a week later, things are a little bit coming into focus. Elizabeth, you've actually written about this. So bring us up to speed very quickly on, is Venezuela part of America now?
I think Donald Trump would like it to be. Over the weekend, they abducted Nicolas Maduro, the head of state in Venezuela. And initially, the sort of explanation for this was that, we were charging him on charges of drug running, even though Trump's fentanyl obsession doesn't really apply here because there have been cocaine issues with Venezuela, but no fentanyl. And then he sort of blurted out in a press conference that it was really about the oil. He said, we're taking back the oil. It's about the oil. And so now it's about the oil, and everybody kind of acknowledges that.
So is he, like, when he says he's taking back the oil, that kind of implies that the oil used to be American and then the Venezuelans took it and now it's going to be American again? Was there ever a point at which this oil was American?
There's, as with many things Trump says, he distorts things possibly from a place of misunderstanding as much as, from malice. But in 2007, Venezuela nationalized several oil fields that were being run by American companies. Now, since then, this has sort of been straightened out in international courts, and Venezuela has billions of dollars in debt that it owes to these American companies that it's in the process of, or has been in the process of paying down. So when Trump says we're going to take the oil back, that's kind of what he's referring to, but he's sort of aligning the whole thing that, this has already been worked out.
I was under the impression that Venezuela was very much in default on all of that debt and has not been paying it down.
It has not been paying it down. It's in default. Because of this, but the sanctions imposed by the Trump administration, Venezuela can't negotiate its debt or do anything to get out of its default status.
Yes, that's true. But it's also the case that, we're partly responsible for the fact that it can't get out of default status. So whenever he suggests that this is just, remedies the whole problem, I think that's disingenuous. But at any rate, he's now sort of claiming that, we're going to take this oil back and this is going to solve everything. But the reality is he didn't consult any of the American oil companies before he did this. And in order for American companies to benefit from the oil that is in the ground in Venezuela, they have to repair a lot of broken infrastructure that would cost them a lot of money. And there's no evidence that they actually want to do that.
Well, I mean, again, it's still very early days. And certainly Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, says that he's been talking to the CEO of Chevron, whose name I forget, quite frequently, and apparently Trump has been talking to him too. Chevron being by far the biggest player in Venezuela, and they're the
only American player in Venezuela.
The only American player. The biggest player is PDVSA, which is the Venezuelan oil company. Chevron is a significant number two, and in the realm of in the era of sanctions. When PDVSA is not allowed to sell any oil, Chevron is the only company that is really allowed to pump oil and sell oil. Chevron is also owed money as part of, in the way that we are talking about. And the part of the financial aspect of all of this is very much that there is this idea that sanctions will be lifted, oil money will start flowing again, and some quantum of that money at some point will make its way to the American companies who are owed a lot of money to recoup them for the expropriations and yada, yada, yada. But, that's all a long way off, and it seems like, I have to say, it seems like a kind of second-order effect of this whole invasion, kidnapping, putting on trial and all the rest of it. The first order effect, as far as I can tell, is just sort of muscle flexing. It's Donald Trump saying, people are talking about the Monroe Doctrine, but really I feel like this is really just bringing back the right of conquest. He
Yes.
doesn't want to really take over Venezuela, but he wants to show that he could if he wanted to. And he talks about the way that U.S. is in charge of Venezuela, and he's talking about taking over Greenland. And basically, I mean, I was kind of surprised about this. The right of conquest only really ended in 1933. It isn't that long ago that the United States claimed a sort of right of conquest over various dominions. And Roosevelt, in the depths of the Great Depression, kind of said, well, actually, there is this thing called sovereignty and we won't mess with that. And Trump is now sort of rolling that back in a way that is really quite profound, I think.
So I wrote a column for The Nation about this, and my theory was, because it drives me crazy when all the pundits get up and say, Trump is pursuing a strategy that is pursuant to everything we know about political theory. And in this case, they keep saying, he cares about spheres of influence. And my contention is that he doesn't even know what that means. He cares about acquisition, and this comes from his mentality as a commercial real estate guy. So he just views foreign countries as properties and assets to be acquired. And he doesn't see why you can't just go out and buy Greenland.
And specifically, as we have discovered very much with trade war and in many other cases, he lives very much in a world of goods rather than services. So even though 70% of the U.S. economy is services based, what he really cares about is goods trade and the balance of trade and goods. And specifically when it comes to goods, again, he's not really interested in the super sort of high end stuff. He's interested in as far down the value chain as you can get. He really cares about commodities and oil, yes, and also critical minerals, of which Greenland has quite a lot. And I think one of the reasons, again, while, you can do the sort of, Alison Janney's speech from the first season of The Diplomat about why Greenland is so strategically important, I think when it comes to Trump, it's again like those minerals and natural resources that he's eyeing, and he's like, I want that to be American. And while under sort of international law and even American law, the massive oil reserves underneath Venezuela, in the Venezuelan waters are clearly Venezuelan and not American. I think that's a sort of nicety as far as Trump is concerned.
It really does seem like he is taking us back to a very different time when commodities were everything and countries fought each other over the oil or the gold or the minerals, whatever.
Or the silver, remember?
The silver,
Argentina
the
is called The name of Argentina is named after the silver that is there.
Right. And the question I have is this a good idea? I mean, it's 2026 now. The U.S. economy is massive, and free trade has enabled us for a long time to build out a services economy that makes an awful lot of money and isn't dependent on, commodities prices. We have a big tech industry that, yes, needs commodities to operate and increasingly more and more energy to operate. But that's not where our big money comes from. That's not where our power comes from. Our power doesn't come from the oil. We have the largest oil reserves, I believe, the United States does in the world, but our power doesn't derive from our oil. It used to derive from our stability, our services sector, our financial sector, and trust. People trusted the United States as an actor on the world stage. And what he's doing now is destabilizing that trust in favor of showing this kind of old-fashioned show of power that I just don't know if we can go back to that world anymore.
Yeah, and let me add as well that a strong dollar, an independent judiciary, and the idea that everyone can do business in America and trust that they will be treated fairly.
An independent Fed.
Right. He's dismantling those things, and I think more than commodities, those have been really important to America's power over the past 50 since World War II, since the New Deal, maybe even you could argue.
But you all have this very high-minded, commodity-centered economic focus. I've just over the holiday break became obsessed with the idea that he just wanted to rerun the Panama invasion. And that he's such an 80s guy that the template for whatever he was going to do in Venezuela was the invasion of Panama. The timing is pretty close. I was texting Mary Harris, do you think this will happen on Christmas Day? If the weather had been favorable for Trump, it probably would have happened on Christmas Day. I just feel like he can't get out of the 1989 cycle.
That was the exact thesis of my column. And I thought that, he also, when you think about Trump's understanding of history, because his brain really is frozen during that era, that's also the period where we arrested Manuel Noriega and indicted him in the U.S. on charges of drug running. And he had been a sort of useful tool for the U.S. until he wasn't.
Exactly.
And I get the sense that, Trump is a little resentful that he doesn't have his own Noriega in South America right now. It's why he obviously has no problem with authoritarians. He loves Jair Bolsonaro. And so I think some of it was his focus on Maduro was that it partly expected him to sort of cooperate in the way that Noriega did initially. And it just didn't happen. And
well,
so
he expected him to disappear off into gilded exile in Turkey, and that didn't happen. He does have his own, favored South American leader in Javier Milei, of course. And now they are very much trying, Marco Rubio is very much trying to butter up Delcy Rodriguez, the new president of Venezuela, and try and turn her into a kind of, U.S. puppet. Whether this
And
will succeed
table
is...
tennis aficionado, we learned.
She's really good at it.
I feel like table tennis.
Right now.
Table tennis is in the air right now. Who would win in a table tennis match between Delcy Rodriguez and Timothy Chalamet? This is what I want to know.
Well, you remember we reopened diplomatic relations with China in the 70s with a
Ping
ping
pong.
pong tournament. So-
I do, and it was it became a craze.
This is when being Gen X is really helpful.
I was thinking, and maybe this is like it's a little tangential, but I was listening to, I think, an Odd Lots episode about Venezuela, and they had an expert on who talked about Hugo Chavez. He explained that to say that Venezuela nationalized their oil market is like a little oversimplified, because U.S. oil companies had always had to pay a certain percentage of their revenue or something. They had to pay up to Venezuela for the right to get the oil out of the country. And when Chavez came into power, he started asking for more and more and more and more money. And at some point, companies were like, fuck this. This place is not a good place to do business anymore. And I was thinking that sort of in the context now of the White House, because obviously we're not anywhere near Hugo Chavez levels of, give me the money. But we are going down this sort of like command capitalism road with President Trump right now, where, he's asking for
10% of Intel?
10% of Intel, a cut of this revenue, a cut of that revenue. And it does seem like he should maybe pause, take a time out, learn a lesson from what happened in a country like Venezuela.
Well, so wait, I need to ask Emily, because you're like way more across this than I am.
I'm just listening to pods.
But did the U.S. ever do what it had threatened to do and take a stake in TikTok? Where are we at with TikTok right now?
TikTok, they announced the U.S. deal. Why are you putting me on the spot like that?
But yeah, he said that he wanted a stake in TikTok as well. So many announcements have been made saying it's going to happen.
I don't think we have a stake in TikTok, no.
Trump also just operates like a mafia guy. He thinks that everybody owes him a cut for anything that he touches.
And that is a dangerous road to go down. That's how you destabilize an economy and like make it more and more increasingly difficult to do business in the U.S. And I do think that's the path we're on.
Yeah, but also, Emily, to be very clear about this, whenever a multinational oil company drills in any country in the world, including the United States, they need to pay royalties to the country that they are drilling in. This is universal, and it applies in everywhere. And the way they do this is they draw up a contract with the country, and they're like, we will give you this level of royalties per barrel, or this percentage of profits, or whatever it is in the contract. And then they go ahead and they start operating, and they can plan decades ahead, because you need to be able to plan decades ahead to make all of these things profitable. And those contracts are very, very important, and you cannot abrogate those contracts. And the problem is that Chavez did abrogate those contracts and tried to renegotiate them on the fly. And that is exactly why the World Bank court, whose name escapes me, basically said this was illegal, and this is why all of these companies are owed all of these billions of dollars, right? So the nationalization is the same thing as the renegotiation. Like they are tantamount to the same thing. And this is also, by the way, we should probably mention this, why Trump's promises of hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in Venezuela are unlikely to come to fruition, because the oil companies, or any company investing $100 billion in anywhere, needs certainty that whatever contract they're signing is going to be able to repay them that $100 billion over time, and more, with profits and all the rest of it, right? And if you're Chevron or Exxon or anyone signing a contract right now with an illegitimate government, which is run by the United States, in the face of all of this chaos, the chances that contract is going to last for the next 40 years, or however long it takes you to recoup your investment, is tiny. So no sensible oil company will do that.
I worry also about, the longer term repercussions of the way the international community is looking at this, because they're fully, you can tell, expecting this to happen somewhere else. because Trump is eyeballing, Colombia and Cuba and so on. And it just sort of reinforces the international stereotype that we're just a nation of room temperature IQ biffs demanding everybody's lunch money, because that's Trump's. I mean, Trump doesn't really have a diplomacy, lens. That's just the way that he thinks about it. He thinks, everybody else owes America something.
To that point, and people have been talking about this too. Typically, in the past, when the U.S. does something with another country, invades, whatever, they talk about democracy and they're going to set up a democratic state. Like, there's that rhetoric, and people say, I don't believe it, blah, 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 but they still use the rhetoric. In this case, the White House isn't using that rhetoric about spreading democracy or making Venezuela into a democracy. They just want to make it great again. But I kind of thought, like, oh, that matters a little bit. But then, and Felix might be happy to know this, when I listened to that interview with bond restructuring. Sovereign debt restructuring king, friend of the pod, Lee Buchheit. And he was talking about how let me see if I can explain this. When a company like Venezuela has all this debt and it needs to be restructured, and a country like the U.S. has come in and done a thing where, like with Iraq, we invaded or whatever, and with Venezuela, we did a thing. We did a thing. We did do a thing. We stole their bro. Then we come in and we have to renegotiate all this debt. The country owes a bunch of money. The question is how much are they actually going to have to pay back? Blah, 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 blah. And then there's a little prioritization that goes on. Who are you going to consider when you think about paying back the debt? Are you going to think about the people of the country and the burden you put on them to pay back the debt as you're trying to build a democracy? Do you want to weigh down the new democracy with a bajillion gajillion dollars in debt? That'll make it hard to get buy-in for the new government if everyone is remember what happened to Germany, blah, 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 Treaty of Versailles. It's not good. But if you're prioritizing building a democracy, you're going to think about restructuring the debt very differently, and maybe in a way that's beneficial to the people. But if you're prioritizing oil and oil companies and how much they're owed, then you're talking about a really different situation. So as it turns out, it really matters what your rhetoric is about democracy in the end, which kind of surprised me to think about, because I'd always been it's just talk. But it's not.
I think there are two signs that rebuilding democracy was not really the intention. One is that when right after it happened and people were asking for, what's the plan? Who's running Venezuela now? And then there was a lot of, hot potatoing between administrative members. And then Rubio kind of got up and said, well, he tried to articulate a reasonable sort of plan, And in the middle of it, Trump kind of interrupted him and said, we're going to take back the oil, and kind of ruined that line of thinking. But another thing is that last week, Stephen Miller on record did a big critique of the Marshall Plan, where he argued that it was kind of a big mistake, and that, we'd helped all these countries and now they owe us. And so I just find it highly unlikely that anything that they do will be done with an eye toward, how do we rebuild here for the people of Venezuela as well as America, because they just don't have that orientation.
Right. And the orientation, it turns out, is so important.
So I agree with both of you very much on this. But by the same token, and I will also say that the bond market agrees with you, that the value of Venezuela's bonds has gone up from 7 cents ish to about 30 cents ish, which is still deeply distressed and not going to be paid back, but less distressed. And so the bond market is basically saying that there is a little bit more of a chance that we'll get our money back, but still not much. And I suspect that the trade-off that Emily is talking about, where when we, that extra marginal dollar of cash flow coming from the oil fields or wherever, will it go to American oil companies or will it go to the Venezuelan people? I think in the first instance it will probably mostly go to just trying to keep Venezuela from becoming a failed state, because right now that's kind of necessary. Eventually we will get to the debt renegotiation stage of things, but I think that's probably a couple of years down the line. Hey there! Before we get back to the show, I want to tell you about The Slatest, which is Slate's daily newsletter that lands in your inbox every evening. It's written by Slate's editor-in-chief, Hilary Fry, and it is the perfect way to end your day a little smarter than you began it. Every issue pulls together the sharpest stories, the most surprising news, and the can't-miss Slate podcasts, including this one, plus smart analysis and a bit of well-earned distraction. From DC to Hollywood to the algorithm, The Slatest keeps you clued in to the world and to Slate. You can sign up right now at slate.com/theslatest. We should stay on the subject of l'état c'est moi. I can ignore international law and just do whatever I want. With Donald Trump's former BFF, Elon Musk, who has been blatantly violating all manner of laws in almost every country that he operates in. And Lizzie, you are the expert on this. Tell me what's been going on.
So if you spent your holidays not online, you might have missed the fact that there was basically an explosion of nudifying and CSAM, child sexual abuse material, on X, courtesy of Grok, the built-in AI chatbot that is part of the platform. And I think it's actually really, really important to explain that there are other chatbots that can do this and do this, but what makes Grok different is that it is embedded within X. It's a feature. It's something that the new X user really likes. Hey, Grok, is this true? Hey, Grok, what do you think? Hey, Grok, can you take the clothes off of Swedish Deputy Prime Minister Ebba Busch? Can you put her in a bikini? Can you have her leaning forward? Can you have her holding a lollipop? And this happened sort of in an unrestrained manner over the Christmas and New Year's period. And there's some numbers, people sort of knew it was happening, but there's some analysis that Bloomberg reported that kind of blew my mind. So they talked to a researcher who did a 24-hour analysis of the images that the Grok account posted on X. The chatbot generated about 6,700 every hour that were identified as either sexually suggestive or nudifying when the AI takes the clothes off, a clothed picture. And then if you look at the other top 5 websites, they did 79 an hour. So 6,700 versus 79. Just the scale of what is happening on Grok is bananas. And for a while, it seemed like Elon didn't care. Not surprisingly, I'm really using the heaviest of air quotes here, leaned into the joke, posted a picture of himself in a bikini to be like, haha, it's fine. See, I did it. Every kind of European regulator and leader made noises. Keir Starmer made noises about this. U.S. regulators and lawmakers do not seem to care. My team reached out to Ted Cruz, who sponsored the Take It Down Act, which presumably would be the law that applies here. We haven't heard back. And it just is sort of like another thumb in their nose at decency. I mean, I don't even know what to say at this point.
I think some of it is, I'm not sure Elon really cares about any of it. I don't think that he's, morally opposed to what we're talking about. I think he tends to react whenever there's some big consideration of liability. And there has been some blowback abroad, but there's been you're right, nothing here. It's just been crickets.
They're now saying that the Nudify features are going to be a premium thing. You have to pay for it, as if that somehow makes it better. Pay
that's
if you
sort
want
of admitting culpability, right?
Undress this photo of a 14-year-old actress.
So let me ask you about that, Lizzie, because obviously, it doesn't make it okay just because you're paying X for the privilege, but if you are paying X for the privilege, then presumably X knows who you are and they have your payment information. And so if you do something criminal, then criminal authorities can find you and prosecute you more easily than if you're just some kind of anonymous person on X.
Yeah, but X has that information from people anyway when you sign up for an account. Like, you can pay for child porn and they're going to, you're going to be found if you are paying for the premium feature. Like, yes, X knows who you are, but X also knows who you are when you're signing in to your own account. Even if it's a pseudonymous account, you have an IP address, you have various details that you have entered into the platform. They can find this stuff. I mean, one of the hallmarks of reporting on this, and reporters who have covered this for a while have learned not to do this. People used to say to X when it actually responded to reporter inquiries, instead of writing back mainstream media lies or sending you a poop emoji, they would say, hey, the following accounts, bloop, blop, blip, have posted what appears to be child sexual abuse material. Do these violate your terms of service? Don't you need to take them down? Aren't they legal? And then the company would just take them down and be like, yeah, we did that. And reporters learned not to give them the examples in advance, to say, I have seen these things, so that the companies, and it was not just X that would do this, Meta would do this too, wouldn't preemptively take the thing down and be like, yes, we're on it. Thank you for
but don't
bringing
you want
that to
the
market.
companies to take these things down?
Yes, you
weren't
do,
they
but
providing a service?
they were doing it in this window of time where the reporter would tip them off, then they would take it down and be like, aha, we did it.
Or we don't have this problem.
We don't have it yet, right?
What actually is illegal? Children, you can't undress children on the internet. That's definitely criminal and illegal. And even Elon Musk says, we don't want to do that. Beyond that, this argument of we're all just having fun. Here I am, Elon Musk in a bikini. This is just fun stuff. How illegal is that? The quote unquote fun harassment.
This is where the Take It Down Act kind of comes into play. And it made it, so the law was passed in May. It criminalized non-consensual sharing of intimate images and digital forgeries, so deepfakes. But it sort of has this mix of penalties. There's some fines, there's some jail time, but you have to say, take that down. They have 48 hours to comply, but the platforms have until May to fully comply with the law. So we're in this period of time where it's not entirely clear to me that the platforms have to do this yet until May.
So you have to take it down. The law is clear. It's the title. Do you have to not offer a feature that lets you make the thing? Is that illegal to just have the feature? Because if it's not, then that just seems like a crazy cat and mouse. Shouldn't you have to ban the nudify capability?
It's the publication that is the publication of the thing is the violation. I know. So now this is why you're starting to see calls for just ban X, just ban the platform. Because what else is it for? It is so overwhelmingly for this at this point. Yes, there are, I still have a shell account that is on there. I'll go on there. Governments still put stuff out on there. People do still talk on there. But when you look at the overwhelming mush of stuff, it's crypto bros and weight loss and nudifying.
So let me ask you about X, because a few months ago, I think it was last year sometime, X ceased to exist as an independent company. It got merged into XAI, which is Elon's AI company. And the primary product of XAI is not X, it's Grok. And X has basically now become a Grok playground, a place where XAI can ingest huge amounts of people typing intelligent things and dumb things and just all the things that people type, and learn about language and all the different languages that people use on the platform, and can roll out Grok and allow people to play with Grok The two of the most, if not the two most valuable AI startups in the world are OpenAI and XAI because they are the two that are most used by normal people. ChatGPT has
that word "normal" is doing a lot of heavy lifting. But okay,
but like ChatGPT has 300 million users, whatever it is, and Grok has also got hundreds of millions of users because it's managed to, infiltrate itself via what used to be known as Twitter.
And it just raised $20 billion this week.
And it just raised $20 billion this week from people who clearly think this is a feature rather than a bug. So in this world of kind of AI land grabs, where you ask forgiveness rather than permission because the most important thing is to just get out there in the hands of as many users as you can, does this strategy actually make perfect sense from the point of view of what Elon is doing?
He's got you there.
He does kind of got me there. Well, but I guess the question is, like, what's the strategy, right? If it's just to make money, yeah. And OpenAI is, has been talking about rolling out its erotic mode. Porn makes money. Porn has always made money. This gets into like this really murky area where you have like First Amendment questions, but then also questions about like the age, because people are taking photos of adults when they were younger and nudifying them, and so like adult content has a lot of First Amendment protections. It should, but like adult content that's made out of children, no. And I think the companies don't want to answer these questions because it's profitable.
Well, I mean, it's losing a lot of money. It's not actually profitable, but it's...
Well, now they're making it a premium feature.
They're making it a premium feature, so I'm saying porn is profitable. Over, like, historically, porn makes money.
And porn does lead to tech innovation. We know that. So, like, if porn is what Grok is for, that leads to more innovation and integrating AI into social media. It kind of makes a lot of sense.
Right, but if it's revenge porn and kiddie porn, not so much.
There is something about... I think they've a little bit succeeded with Grok, because the times I go on X, people really engage with Grok as they've really anthropomorphized Grok. And, they're always asking, Grok, is this true? Like, it really has taken on... No one uses the term X very much to describe that site. Everyone still says Twitter. But the term Grok is a thing. Like, he made it a thing. That's no small thing. So it is interesting to think
It's
about
not, but it also drives me insane when people anthropomorphize Grok. Like, there were all these news stories that were like, Grok apologizes. I'm like, Grok didn't apologize. Grok is not a representative of the company.
Yeah, we're down a rabbit hole here.
Grok is a word prediction machine.
And also an image generator.
Yes, and an image generator.
So just so I'm clear about this, was this like some upgraded version of Grok that got rolled out around Christmas time that suddenly allowed all of this to happen? Or was this something it could do all along and then everyone just realized and they jumped on it?
I actually can't answer that in a perfect way. I think it's the latter, though, because there have always been people like doing this in the darker corners of the internet. There's like Telegram channels that are dedicated to jailbreaking every AI model, finding the prompt that will make it disregard its instructions. And so I think Grok has always had this capability. But I'm a little over my skis in saying that.
I feel like, companies that make these kinds of technologies, they know these problems are going to emerge because they do anytime you have technologies that can do this. Like, I remember when, 3D animation was just starting to become sophisticated. There were a lot of discussions about, well, what if people make CSAM, but, they're animated characters? When VR was nascent, there was a lot of discussion about that too. It's like, well, what if somebody sexually assaults a character or somebody else's avatar in cyberspace? What does that mean? So it's not like they couldn't anticipate that this was going to happen, So the sort of like reactionary response from them, like, oh, well, oops. just seems completely disingenuous.
I don't think they are saying that. I think Elon in particular is leaning into it, and he's like, haha, this is great, yeah. And like, yeah, he has said many times that, trust and safety teams are a woke thing that ought to be abolished.
Right, they basically don't exist.
Yeah. And I don't think he's even like crying crocodile tears over this. I think he's absolutely loving every minute of it.
It reminds me in some ways, go with me on this, of the allegations of extremely egregious racism at the Tesla Fremont plant. So the Tesla Fremont plant was sued by the state of California. When you read into or talk to some of the workers who were involved, and you read the legal documents, and like I've done that, talked to some of these people, the stuff that was being said was so astonishingly awful that like it was really sickening. And Elon's response was very similar. He had this blog update that was like, hey, you shouldn't do things that hurt people's feelings, but also people need to grow up and like get on with it. And that attitude of his like seems to carry through to all of this. Like, yeah, maybe don't make child porn, but also whatever, here we are on the internet. And like that kind of crystallizes his philosophy. And the thing about Elon Musk, which we have been saying since Doge, since before that, and Tesla investors need to think about this too, is I don't see anything on Earth that can stop Elon Musk. He's just so rich that there are no consequences.
Well, I think he's just a nihilist. If he has any values anywhere in there, I don't know what they are, because he's certainly never drawn lines anywhere without somebody putting a gun to his head.
His value is colonizing Mars, Elizabeth. It's the only thing he cares about.
But this is the Max Reed column, right? And Max Reed wrote this week, like, everyone seems to be afraid of Elon Musk, in the U.S. especially, as Lizzie already discussed. The regulators are doing jack nothing. And in Europe, there's like some threats, maybe like whispers of threats is my sense from reading the coverage, but nothing really is happening. But Max Reed makes the point, like, maybe don't be so afraid of Elon Musk. Like, we saw the backlash to what he did with Doge. He was out at the federal government. I mean, the consequences are long lasting and ongoing, believe me. But like, he people don't like this stuff. Like, the U.S. is still and these European countries are still democracies. People's opinions still matter. And like, people don't like nudifying pictures of young kids. Maybe they like nudifying pictures of women in power. That's like a whole other topic. That's not what this podcast is about. But the regulators shouldn't be so afraid, was his point. And I think it's a good point.
Well, he had that great line. He said, when you think about it this way, it's sort of, you understand why, Congress isn't doing anything about it. He said the single largest Republican donor refuses to shut down CSAM machine. And that's why when Lizzie's people call Ted Cruz, he's like, I don't know.
He did do a tweet, or an X, Ted Cruz, saying that this wasn't bad.
I do think there's one person who can defeat Elon Musk, by the way.
Who's the one person?
Who is the Musk?
This is going to sound
Superman?
deranged. I just want to be clear.
Say it.
I think the one person who could and probably should have sued when this happened to her and has the power to do this is Taylor Swift. She is rich. She is powerful.
She has the power to like sell vintage Cartier watches, but like, it was amazing how many people were urging her for years to come out and have a political opinion and tell people how to vote, and then she did that, and it had no effect at all.
It did, though. Like, you're wrong about that. It increased voter registration in areas where she did concerts.
And I think she has, like, why would she be afraid of Elon Musk?
I don't think the reason, because
let's say they nudify me, what am I? I'm like some random middle-aged mom, but you need someone who has the standing to say, this is ugly, this is silly, you're acting like a 12-year-old with unlimited funds, knock it off.
Yeah, she could try. I hope you're right. I don't think she'll do it, and I'm honestly skeptical that she would succeed. I think there would be a Streisand effect of like people just nudifying her 100 times as much.
Don't underestimate how much people hate women, especially when they start like asserting themselves. Like the cultural support can turn pretty quickly.
Maybe it needs to be a menopausal woman who just doesn't care anymore.
It has to be a bro, I think. It has to be a guy.
Like, there's literally nothing you could do to me anymore. I'm just like, fine, whatever.
Or people start nudifying Ted Cruz's kids, and then,
Then they care.
Then they can't say, like, ooh, well, not my problem.
But I want to stay on the subject of the Doge aspect of Elon and the way in which the U.S. government is continuing to try and do, like, because you remember January, like this time last year, like it was such a long time ago. But there was this point in time, like pre-Liberation Day, where the big Trump story was like his attempt to reduce the size of government and for the government to spend less money.
Well, okay, hold on a second, Felix. That is not actually what they were doing. That is what the headline was, but that's not what they were doing.
Oh.
What they were doing was firing federal workers and creating an interoperable database where you can stop the silos between the way government information is shared.
And also killing USAID and various other things. But the segue here, Lizzie, before you derail my segue.
Go ahead, sorry.
The segue here is to the federal government deciding that it is going to freeze $10 billion of, well, Emily, you explain.
At the end of the year, the beginning of the year, there was a YouTube video where a guy named Nick went to a childcare center, a few childcare centers in Minnesota with another guy who is only identified by his first name, and they discovered some of these places were empty or wouldn't let them in because why would you let some random dudes into your daycare where there are little babies and toddlers? Anyways, the video went very, very viral and landed at the same time in Minnesota. There have been fraud scandals with public money discovered by the last administration and prosecuted, but kind of bad. So the swirl of these two things happening led the White House to say, we're going to freeze child care funds, the federal money that is used to pay for child care centers and for what's now called TANF, but which is basically welfare, not only in Minnesota, but in 5 states. Coincidentally, they all are run by Democrats. It's California, Illinois, Colorado, New York, Minnesota. And so they sent letters to these states and they said, we're freezing your flow of cash until you give us all this data. And they've asked for a tremendous amount of data. It's not clear. The states are confused how they even respond to that. And it's not even clear that they are able to get the data together. Like it's just like a bureaucratic administrative burden pile up like you've never seen before. And so the night before we were taping Thursday night, the 5 states, as you could predict, their attorneys general got together again. It's like their 50th time getting together basically, and sued the White House and said, this is really unfair. You're targeting us. You don't have any evidence of fraud. And I've been reporting on it all week and asking them, what is the evidence of systemic fraud? And the White House has not given me any evidence. They sent me some links to stories about arrests and prosecutions, like one-offs in New York, in Minnesota, in California. They haven't sent me any articles or news of arrest or prosecution in Colorado, for example. And I asked Colorado, they're like, we don't know. There's nothing going on here. Like, this is anyway. It's just the latest
not to mention, I feel like I should just jump in with a little bit of common sense here, which is even if there is fraud, freezing all of the money for childcare is a super crazy remedy.
Right. Someone told me it's like killing a fly with a bazooka, basically. And the laws, establishing these 3 programs, it's childcare block grants, it's temporary assistance for needy families, and these smaller block grants that fund things like foster care. All of these laws have very clear rules and provisions and processes in place for fighting fraud that pretty much do work. And those laws don't have a provision for freeze all the funds. Like, that's one of the things the lawsuit says. You can't just freeze all the funds. It's not how it works. But doing this, crying fraud, and then cutting off help for the most disadvantaged, and to be clear, like, the most disadvantaged people, they're cutting off welfare money, the poorest people in the country, is a very successful strategy. It's not one the White House is coming up with de novo. Like, this is like, you can listen to Slate's amazing podcast about welfare, the welfare queen era, and go back to Ronald Reagan. Crying fraud and then taking away people's social services money is like guaranteed to work. It's really hard to fight back against.
Let me try and ask you the first big question I have here, which is this money that reimburses the states for the money that they spend on childcare? I guess what I'm asking is, has there been any actual effect on the childcare services yet? Or is this just like pushing the burden that used to be borne by the feds onto the states? So far, the states the states get this money from the federal government, and then they like draw it down, and then they hand it out to the childcare providers, or sometimes they give it to parents in the form of vouchers. The money is still flowing. Like, this new freeze hasn't had an effect yet because it's so early, but it's like a matter of time. And then whether or not the states can step in really depends on the state. Like, some states are like really well placed to keep things going. Like New York State just this past week announced more funding for childcare. They're going to do care for 2-year-olds now in the city, which is like awesome. So they can afford it. But then there's other states like Indiana, Colorado. Indiana doesn't count, but Colorado, who probably won't be able to make up the difference. And we already know about this because there was all this extra funding that went to these childcare grants during the pandemic, like records amount of money. States took it and like ran with it. It was temporary, but they opened new childcare centers, they raised pay, they gave bonuses, they did all this stuff. The money is gone, and now we're seeing what happens when the money is gone. It's like, to bring up Indiana, like worst childcare situation in the country, long waiting lists, providers going out of business, all of this. So you can expect if this freeze goes on, you'll see even more of that, because this is like a big washout of the tide, 10 billion. And it's important economically. Like, it's not just about I find that when reporting on this stuff, people don't care very much about poor people. But with these childcare centers, a lot of them they depend on the federal money and the state money, and they take private paying people as well as subsidized people. So if they lose their funding, the private paying people who aren't the poorest and most disadvantaged, they still lose too, because these centers close down and like none of the kids can go. It's like
and none of the parents can work.
And none of the parents can work. So that's why we say we care about it in the business pages. So
Thank you,
bad.
Emily. It is bad. And
Thank you for letting me talk about that. I wrote like 10 stories, but I feel like they're all over the place.
Do you think this is a kind of resurgence of the we're going to take a chainsaw to government thing that we saw at the beginning of the Trump administration? Or is this just like, part of the general scattershot, we're just going to crack down on anything that seems leftish?
I think it's a continuation of what Lizzie started out with us talking about, because remember, like, the thing with Doge was we're going to crack down on, quote, waste, fraud, and abuse, and they've really succeeded in getting everyone to say waste, fraud, and abuse. Even when I speak to people on the left and progressives and advocates, they're like, of course we don't want any waste, fraud, and abuse. Like, it's just become like a mantra. And so I think it is more about cracking down on waste, fraud, and abuse, and less about cracking down on leftists. But I could be wrong. I mean, I wonder what Elizabeth would say.
I think they're trying to thread two needles here. One is that they want these programs to be smaller anyway, but they're also using them in the culture war. They keep suggesting that assistance programs are heavily benefiting undocumented migrants and particularly and minorities in particular. They're just rerunning the welfare queen playbook from the 80s.
Yeah, it does seem like that. And they announced, or Scott Besson announced on Thursday, they're creating a new position like an AG that will just work on fraud stuff, and they're like putting more restrictions on sending money out of the country, remittances. I don't. It's a
What's
lot.
crazy, and I feel like this is a little undercovered in media. I was a public policy major, and one of the things that kept getting hammered into us by people who actually work on policy is that fraud in the government sector is so much lower than it is in the private sector because there are all these guardrails and, they're heavily litigated and so on. But if you were just looking at the news and you had no idea, you would think government was just the worst purveyor of fraudulent activity, because we don't hear about, we hear about it disproportionately because Republicans have successfully made it a part of the public discourse. And even Democrats often take it for granted that, there is copious fraud in every government program.
I blame the movie Dave. I think it all goes back to the movie Dave.
What was the movie Dave? I don't know.
Oh, Kevin Kline's like the accountant, and he goes through and is like, oh, well, I would never balance a budget. I would never do books this way. And then he like, and the federal budget.
When did that movie come out? Was that like a...
It's a Clinton era thing. It's like a welfare reform triangulatory Democrat.
It was the point at which the household metaphor, we should treat the nation's we should treat the fiscal situation of the country just as you would treat your household budget, when that went super mainstream, and we've never really recovered.
I'm sorry to get so exercised about the Doge thing. I just like when you look, but when you actually step back and look at what they did, there's this whole, we're going to save $1 trillion. They didn't save any money. Federal spending didn't go down at all. It went up.
So Jonathan Cohn wrote a really good, my former colleague at HuffPost, who's now at the Bulwark. He wrote a great piece sort of breaking down the Minnesota fraud scandal. And he makes this really good piece, which is one of the reasons there is fraud in some of these programs sometimes. And one of the reason is because the programs are structured so poorly. It's not government run, right? The government gives money to the states give money to these private actors. So there's like room to screw it up.
Because Republicans shaped the policy to look like that.
Because Republicans shaped the policy to look like that, it makes it more susceptible to fraud. That's one point I want to make. And the other point I want to make, because who knows when I'll be allowed to talk about this subject again.
It's not like you're the host of this show or anything.
But we all have to breach a consensus. But I started getting...
This is like the Swiss government. We only do it if we all want to do it.
Yeah, we all have to turn our keys or whatever.
Yeah.
So I started looking into TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, because most of the $10 billion is from TANF, which is welfare, because Bill Clinton he ended welfare as we know it, and he made it into TANF. And what I realized and learned, which maybe all of you already know, but welfare, temporary, assistance for women with children, that they was created alongside Social Security a bajillion years ago, but it was more of a targeted program, targeted to poor people. And they, over the years, poor women, disproportionately poor Black women, people started to hate it, the program, right? Not the people receiving it, but everyone else. And they were able to craft this narrative of welfare queens and ultimately to get rid of the program. But it's so interesting because it came up alongside Social Security, which everybody loves. It's universal, and you can't do anything to touch Social Security. People will freak out. Even Donald Trump has pledged over and over, I'm not going to mess with it. I'm not going to mess with it. People love it. And that is all I wanted to say, except for the one other thing is that Social Security gives, and one of the knocks on welfare was like, we're paying these freeloading women to just sit home and get fat and live off the public wealth, the public dime. They don't even work. But Social Security, women who have never worked, when they're older, they get paid by the federal government because if they were married, they get Social Security, and like no one ever complains about those freeloading women.
It's about the perception of who the recipients are, and overwhelmingly, people do perceive the recipients of assistance as being minority women who are single. And so when you do this in polling and you ask people, do you support, without kind of framing it as a specific policy, the answer for a lot of people, and these are people who unsurprisingly skew Republican, about whether they support a policy is who they think the intended recipient is. And so because Reagan-era people branded the average recipient of assistance as a single black woman, the underlying racism there is the difference in support. It's that, people do understand that like old white men get Social Security and
their wives
they should.
who never worked a day in their lives, they get it too, and it's fine. But anyway, and now I guess it's not about welfare queens. It's about like undocumented immigrants. They're the ones that are now the scapegoats.
That's the demonization. I'm sure you all have listened to it because you're all brilliant, but my former colleague, Chrissy Clark, made this amazing podcast that continues, but it's called The Uncertain Hour, and it is like the history of welfare and all the ways welfare touches the American system that we don't think about because that Reagan narrative is the one that takes over.
Fascinating. I'm going to listen to that podcast. Very exciting.
So good.
Once I'm done listening to Lizzie O'Leary's podcast, of course.
Yeah, about CSAM.
But yes, we should have a numbers round. Elizabeth, do you have a number?
I do, and it's $50,000, and that's dollars. And that's what you can pay to a new dating/matchmaking company called Keeper that's powered by AI. You can pay them $50,000 for marriage bounty, where they will, you'll pay an intro fee for each match. And then if the matches lead to a long-term relationship, you pay them the full $50,000. But this company is being run by three guys in Silicon Valley who are basing the company on things like predictive analytics, AI, and what someone termed meta-rational marriage practices. So it also won't surprise you that, so some of the things that they measure for, like you go through a whole process where they ask you a million questions, and like your SAT scores, your feelings about entrepreneurs, your ideal ethnicity, and they will scan your photos to estimate your body fat percentage and the strength of your jawline.
Oh my God.
So buried, this is from a Times article, and about 2/3 of the way down, when you're already sort of creeped out, one of the founders has an account on X where in his bio it says, "I love eugenics." And so the reporter sort of asked the other co-founders about this. And the co-founder, whose name is Hunter Ash, said something like, well, I'm not actually advocating for sterilization of minority people, literally. And to me, I was sort of shocked that this wasn't the whole story. But so a typical thing, and he's their marketing director. So one of their pieces of marketing information was something like, if the woman is half a standard deviation above, more agreeable than the man, that's the optimal point for relationship durability. So if you're an aspiring eugenicist looking for a heavily algorithmically driven mate, I guess this is the company for you.
Absolutely amazing. Wow. I'm just going to move straight on here with 24, which is the estimated number of months it is going to take to move the Apple Card from Goldman Sachs to Chase. Chase is now officially, everyone sort of understood that this was going to happen, but it is now officially going to happen. If you have an Apple Card right now, you are borrowing money from Goldman Sachs every time you use it. In 24 months, more or less, that will then be Chase. Goldman Sachs has lost about $7 billion on its ill-fated attempt to get into consumer finance. They are selling about $20 billion of balances to Chase at a discount of $1 billion. So Chase is basically paying $19 billion for these $20 billion of balances. So that's another $1 billion that Goldman is losing here. The Apple Card itself, is a perfectly good product, and one has to kind of wonder at some point, like, is one of the reasons it's so good is because it's been like subsidized to the tune of like many billions of dollars by Goldman Sachs, and will it continue to be good if Chase runs it on a for-profit basis? But in any case, it will basically continue. It will continue to be a MasterCard. We don't need to worry about it becoming an American Express. And
what about our ads?
What about our ads?
Just change what we say in the fine print part of the ad? Or?
Exactly. The ads will continue, but just with a different financial.
Or will
provider.
they?
Or will they? I think we're buying them from Apple. I don't know. Anyway, Emily, what's your number?
My number is 2.9 billion. That's dollars. That's sushi sales at retail stores, including grocery stores, for the year ending November 2025. That's up 7% from the year before. And sushi is very popular. And the reason I'm using this number is just an excuse to tell you about this Wall Street Journal A-head, which was about parents going broke, spending all their money on sushi for their kids who love it more than chicken nuggets or French fries or tater tots. They just want to eat $200 sushi dinners, and the parents apparently have no control over this. And they interviewed a kid named Elliot. He is 8 years old and he lives in Calgary. And his quote is, quote, "I love sushi. I don't like it."
My 10-year-old loves, he likes sushi, but only salmon and tuna. But he still eats enough chicken nuggets that I bought him a hat for Christmas that says chicken nuggets in a goth font. And now it's his favorite hat. So
That does sound like a cool
I would
hat.
love to have my child eat sushi. I would love to have my child eat something that isn't beige.
Be careful what you wish
Be
for.
careful what
It's
you
true,
wish for.
it's true.
Can
You gotta
can
pay
you
your
afford
mortgage.
it? Can you afford it, Lizzie? I
He
want
knows
to
sushi from the
do
place around the corner.
your kid's
Fine.
going to be like, I only do tasting menus, Mom.
exactly.
Omakase.
No, I need
Bust.
I need to do the thing which I have done occasionally on this show, but haven't done in many years, which is tell everyone to dig up the now ancient Nick Tosh's piece on sushi from Vanity Fair from years and years and years ago, which to this day is the best thing ever written about sushi. And he basically asks the question, how did sushi become this massive cultural phenomenon in America and in like Midwestern America and in places that are incredibly conservative and that any normal, especially in the 1950s and 60s when the memory of the war against Japan was very fresh, and in a world where no one ever ate raw fish, and raw fish sounds kind of disgusting. How is this possible that it took off so successfully? And the answer, you will not be surprised to hear, is sugar.
Sugar in the rice. They say it in the journal story too.
It's the sugar. It's just a very sweet thing, and that's why kids love it so much.
Yes, that's what it said in the piece. There's a quote even from a sushi chef who says, "I just learned the more sugar you put in there, the more the kids are going to eat it." And I was like, so I felt betrayed because I never realized that sugar was even playing a role in the sushi.
All right, Lizzie.
My number?
It is your turn. What is your number?
My number's 7. And this is 100% lifting a joke from a friend of mine who, after 7 days of 2026, was like, "Thank you for my free trial. I would like to unsubscribe from 2026. I've had a week.
Yeah.
We're good now. Take it back."
But do they want 2025 back?
I don't know. Maybe you could just pick a year at random and rerun it.
1999, that was a good year.
Yes.
I love 98. 98 was good. 99, I was just out of college and clueless, and yeah. I'd take maybe 2003. That was fun.
It was lots of blogs happening in 2003.
Yeah.
Well, okay, on that note, I'm going to open it up to the listeners. Send us an email on slatemoney@slate.com and tell us if you could teleport out of 2026 and into any year of your choice, which year would that be? That email will be read by all of us, not including Lizzie because she's only a guest here, but the other three of us.
I have access to your Slate channel or your Slack channel. I might just get in there and read it.
We will share some of them in the Slack so that Lizzie can read it. It will be read by Jessamine, Molli, and Cheyna Roth, who are our producers. I should also thank Merritt Jacob in Brooklyn for getting Lizzie on the air, and Micah Phillips for making us all look beautiful on YouTube. And mostly you guys for listening. We love you. If you are Slate Plus listeners, you will get to hear all about Greek things. And otherwise, thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week with more Slate Money. And remember to check out the Slatest, Slate's daily newsletter. It's your daily update on the most urgent, surprising, and unusual news delivered straight to your inbox. A special thanks to all our Slate Plus members. If you haven't already, consider joining. Slate Plus members get unlimited access to all of Slate's journalism, plus they get ad-free podcasts, and they help support our independent reporting.